So thank you everyone for joining us for our panel. Just checking that you're in the right spot. This is our Career Changes panel, and I am Rebecca Jackson, your moderator, and I'm just going to go through a few of our housekeeping messages before passing over to Shiva and the panel who will be taking you on our career journey this evening. So first of all, I'd like to welcome our speakers and participants from around the world. We acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land in which this online conference is hosted and the traditional custodians of the lands where our Australian-based speakers and participants are located. We would also like to pay respect to elders past, present and future. Tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa. Ko Rebecca Jackson, toko ingoa no Melbourne aho. On behalf of Microsoft 365 May, I would like to welcome and acknowledge all our speakers and participants from Aotearoa, New Zealand. Thank you for supporting this hui. Also, thank you for being respectful, helpful, kind and constructive during our conference, and in particular this one, because you do have the opportunity to use our chat and ask questions. We want to make sure that all of our panelists and everyone involved in the conference is comfortable, so please note that we do have a code of conduct. You can read the full code of conduct on our website, but be mindful of it during this call. We want everyone to have a fabulous time. And thank you to our sponsors who allow us to make this month-long extravaganza happen through their support and with prizes and things like that. So I am absolutely delighted to introduce you to Shiva Ford. If you don't know who she is, I call her the MVP Wrangler or Whisperer or whatever. So Shiva is the Community Program Manager for Microsoft Most Valuable Professionals and Regional Directors in Australia and New Zealand. And I'm delighted because Shiva is really passionate about helping people with their careers and their growth, which is why I begged her to be the host for this panel, and she gratefully accepted much quicker than I thought she would. So she's going to do an awesome job, and I'm going to be quiet for most of this. So I'll pass over now to Shiva, who is going to introduce you to our wonderful panelists and take the reins for the rest of this recording.
Thank you, Rebecca, and thank you for everyone who is joining us this evening. Really appreciate that you are making time to join us. It's going to be a fun, inspiring chat, or at least that's what we're planning to do. But I also want to thank our incredible panel this evening for making time to share their life story with us. And I will start off by introducing Natalie Yan-Chatonsky. Nat is the founder and CEO of Full-Time Lives. They help people who decide to leave full-time work and build meaningful, active, happy lives. Some people in their community have stopped work completely, which I think from what I hear is what people call retirement. But Nat's going to tell us more about what they actually mean by like their new way of thinking about work. And they also support others who are moving to part-time or building new lives without a full-time job as an anchor. So we'll hear more about Nat's recent entrepreneurial journey and what she's uncovered from scientific research about how to live a long, happy, and healthy life. I think we all want to know about that, don't we? But I will carry on and introduce our other panelists. We've got Amy Kapernick. She is a freelance developer, business owner, and conference addict. Her words, not mine. She regularly shares her knowledge with her peers and the next generation of developers by mentoring, coaching, teaching, and feeding into the tech community in many ways. Amy can be found volunteering her time with vendors, ACS, She Codes, which is formerly Perth Web Girls, and Muses.js, which was formerly Node Girls. She also works as an evangelist for Yale conferences. She's a Twilio, is that how you pronounce it, Amy? Twilio champion, Microsoft MVP, and has been nominated for the Women in Tech WA Awards in the last 2 years. Kieran Jacobsen is another one of our Microsoft MVPs. He is the head of IT, or information technology, at Telstra Purple, and is a cloud and data center management MVP. Kieran's interests focus on automating processes and the integration of security processes within DevOps. He considers himself as a jack of all trades and is also quite active in the conference circuit. I think Kieran and Amy kind of bump into each other in some of these events, in a lot of these conferences. Kieran is also an advocate and member of the LGBTQI community. Finally, but definitely not the least, is my colleague Sarah Bowden, who is currently the One Commercial Partner and Small, Medium and Corporate Business Director for Microsoft New Zealand. And she is currently responsible for the overall strategy, sales, marketing, and partner programs for Microsoft's SMC. That's what the Small, Medium, and Corporate stands for. Customers, partner ecosystems in NZ. However, in the next few days, or basically by Monday, Sarah will be moving to Australia, or will be working for Microsoft Australia to be the digital sales lead for the Australian subsidiary. She's very, very passionate about helping businesses be even more successful, whether it's through leveraging technology to optimize their operations, create new products and services, or driving change through marketing and business strategy. Now, I hope I was able to give justice to everyone's backgrounds, but I don't want to keep talking. All I'm doing tonight is asking the questions. So I might start off with you, Nat, and then Amy, Kieran, and Sarah. In 2 to 3 minutes, like this is like I don't want to sound like a beauty pageant question, but just a bit of a nutshell. How would you describe your career over the last, say, 5, 10, 15, however number of years you've been working? Tell us about some of the highlights or even lowlights, and what have you learned so far? Nat, over to you.
Thanks, Shiva. So my career started pre-internet days, believe it or not. So I'd spent quite a lot of time as a student in Japan, and I really wanted a job where I could use my Japanese and it would take me back to Japan for work. So my first job was at IBM, and it was in the direct marketing team for Asia Pacific. So I got to use my Japanese skills, but as you can imagine, direct marketing as a form of marketing, there's an incredible opportunity to use digital, and I guess at the time, IBM being a technology company didn't necessarily recognize that that was a really great opportunity from a channel perspective. So I guess once I started to hear about this thing called the internet and all these interesting digital companies were coming to Australia, I then went and joined Yahoo and helped build their first online shopping mall, and went out talking to all the traditional retailers to build a store for them. And so I guess that was the beginning of my love for, I guess, entering new markets where there was an untapped opportunity, and using technology as a way to meet customer needs. Now, for me, it was more about the consumer experience. Back then, I was quite materialistic. I really loved shopping. And so I thought, oh, it'd be so great to be able to get stuff delivered to me at my office or at home. If only it was much easier. Look, it took many years before that perfect experience that we get today has now manifested itself. But I really like that early stage, and that took me down a path of, I guess, wanting to be less on the sales side, but more on building product, because I realized since then that I'm a maker. I love making things. So I then subsequently moved from digital and studied design, went and did my second degree, then went and did further study into design and wanted to become an interior designer because I felt like digital wasn't tactile enough. And so as an interior designer, I felt like you really got to learn about how to design for human needs, and really start off with the customer or the person living in that space and design for them. And I guess this was before design thinking was really established in the corporate world, but architects and interior designers have been using it for many years. And so that really exposed to me to kind of developing concepts from a design perspective, and then matching it up with experiences that you want to create for people that you're designing for. So I had a bit of a foray into interior design, but this was also the time when I had a baby And as a junior interior designer, you have to put a lot of your own time into learning to use the software. Like back then, CAD was really clunky. I'm not particularly mathematical. It wasn't particularly creative to use those tools. And I ended up getting quite frustrated with the low level, very detailed stuff that you have to do as a junior. So in parallel with that happening in my personal life, I guess that was when the GFC also hit. So there wasn't much work that was happening for architects, interior design. And so I decided to go back to product management, but not be so narrow as just digital product management. Went and joined Brainmates, where they build all kinds of products and do product strategy for a whole range of different industries. And so I didn't feel like I was necessarily going back. I was still able to use my skills that I learned from being an interior designer, and got to service a whole range of different types of clients, different industries. And I've come and gone from Brainmates over the years. I went and joined a B2B payments company at one point called Cuscal and worked on the new payment system. So digitizing the whole payment system it felt like the very early days of being part of the internet. And that was working with mutual banks and also fintechs that were coming to Australia. So really thinking about what new payment infrastructure to create the best possible types of customer experiences and products could we build. That was really interesting for me. But while I was doing that job, I spent a lot of time going and visiting operational staff in mutual banks. And what I realized, there was a lot of fear of change and the fear of digitization of their jobs. To me, I was actually really excited about digitization of payments, but I realized that people on the ground working behind the counter in operational teams, in call centers, there was so much fear about losing their jobs or their jobs being different, when those of us working in digital thought, oh, this is going to make things really efficient, and they're going to be able to spend more time doing the things that they really love. And I guess it was that realization of spending time with operational staff in sectors like the banking industry that made me realize you've actually got to take people on a journey of change. If you are going to implement these big technical transformation projects, you need to have people who buy into it. They understand how's it going to impact them, how's it going to make their jobs better, and also how does it help their customers? Because the type of people who work in mutual banks in operational roles love their customers and they love making a difference. So it was making them realize that by freeing them up, not having to work with painful legacy banking systems, they could spend more time servicing more complex customer service issues that only a human could do. So there's always a role for humans as well as tech. So around my kind of last 6 months of being in that job, I started to do quite a lot of my own personal research to understand what are the sorts of pain points people go through when they are going through major life and career change later in their lives. And it was like, I guess it was something I was talking to my parents about, thinking about their retirement, but also talking to these people in various different roles where technology has impacted their roles. And a big question about, well, I'm not old enough to retire and I don't have the financial means to retire. What do I do? How can I still lead a meaningful life and career? How do I reskill or find a new job? And so that then kind of doing enough research around that then led me to believe that there was a really good market opportunity to explore further. So hence leaving my job to work full-time on my startup Full-Time Lives with an ex-colleague of mine. And we did, in that first year, it was hundreds of customer interviews and then also spending time in various places around the world, visiting what's called the blue zones, where people live beyond 100 years. So I guess for me, being a product manager, it's not just about interviewing people and looking at scientific data and the quantitative data. It's actually going and seeing where services or solutions have been best done. So for me, the problem I was trying to solve is how to lead a really healthy, meaningful, long life, because we're all going to be living to 90 or 100. So where are they doing it really well? So places like Okinawa in Japan has the highest life expectancy, not just in Japan, but globally. So a couple of years ago, part of my research led me to Okinawa, loved interviewing people there. And what I learned is that community is the most important thing. Like, whilst there's genetics and, diet, a lot of the blue zones eat plant-based food, but community is the key to longevity and leading a meaningful, fulfilling life, and also good health. So I guess this is a long way of just showing how the product management side of me has really intertwined with my entrepreneurial journey.
What makes you excited about the work that you do at the moment, Nat?
I think it's about making a positive difference. As a product manager, you get to work with lots of different industries. It's a skill set that's applicable in lots of different places. But for me, what I realized, having done some work in financial services, I feel like you can build a really great product that meets the needs of customers and helps deliver revenue for a business. But increasingly, I think it's more and more important to have products and services that also deliver social good, that you're taking into account what's the impact on the environment and on the community. And I believe that if you build a product on the outset that looks at all those different factors, you're going to have a more sustainable product that is going to be more successful than your competitors.
Thanks for that. I'm sure that's going to give some our participants some food for thought, because I think everyone's always thinking about how to make the money really quickly, but not really thinking about, like, what's the purpose of all of this. I might head over to Amy, who like, as I said earlier, you're pretty much any conference, any digital or in-person event, we find you there. But I also know that you spend a lot of time with the community and supporting, tons of people through their career journey. But I want to know about your story first, and what excites you about what you're currently doing and what you had done previously.
Well, I kind of feel like I've done nothing now after that career journey. So I actually never considered a career in tech. So sort of if I think back to when I was in high school, I sort of identified that I'd probably want to be able to travel, and I'd want to be able to play with new shiny things. And I was pretty good at dealing with people that I didn't know very well, like meeting lots of new people. So we decided the obvious thing for me to do was to go into engineering. That seemed like the best career route for me. And my first semester of engineering, one of the units I had to do was a programming 101 unit, which I did not want to do. I had no interest in doing programming. I hated it, although I understood it really well. It just all made sense to me. It's to this day the best score I've gotten for a unit. I got 97% for that unit that semester. But I didn't want to do it. I had no interest. I was happy to get the programming over and done with. It wasn't something I wanted to do. And it wasn't until a couple of years later that I started working. I applied for a job to do tech support on campus and started doing that. That led me to realize that I actually hated engineering, and I had zero interest in doing that. So I ended up going and working in IT support full time. And it was around that time that I rebuilt a website for my parents' business, and I rediscovered that I actually really enjoy doing programming, and I enjoy writing code. So at that point, I started doing freelancing and taught myself front-end development. I continued to do that on the side while still working IT, and then I applied to work as a junior developer, and so worked there for just under a year before was made redundant. And at that point, it was sort of not long before Christmas, and no one was hiring for my kind of roles. I'd sort of contact recruiters looking for a junior front-end position, and they go, well, look, we've got a senior C# developer position instead, if you'd like that. And so I tried to pick up a bit of freelancing work to tide me through, and then all of a sudden it had been 4 months, still no one was hiring, and I'd been doing freelancing that whole time. So I started freelancing sort of full time, as that was my primary job. Not long after that, I started working as a developer evangelist for YAO conferences as well, because I was already fairly heavily involved in the community. When I was starting out, the community was really great at helping me out. They were really great support. And so the evangelist role just sort of gave me an excuse to go to more events. And it was about that time that I also got into speaking. And despite hating public speaking at high school and not being very good in it, I just discovered that I really enjoy speaking at events and conferences. So started doing that fairly regularly. I did the math, and last year I was traveling at events for about 32% of the year. And was well on track for besting that this year before I was stuck at home. So now I'm feeding my conference addiction the best I can with virtual events like this one, and just sort of doing my freelance on the side, waiting until we can go out and I can go back to in-person events, whether that be at community meetups or larger conferences.
So what I'm curious, because from what you described earlier when you were contemplating what your career path would be, you've obviously pretty much you've got it, right? Like you've managed to travel and do all these things. But what is it about, say, attending conferences or even sharing your knowledge that you enjoy? Because you do it really well, and you do it a lot. So you must be enjoying it.
I think it's a little bit, I enjoy the thrill of it. So the feel it is, I still get terrified when I get on stage. There are times, there've been times when I'm speaking when I'm worried I'm going to drop my presenting remote because I'm just shaking so much. And there are times when I get really nervous, but then once I get into the swing of it, I relax. And when I get off stage, that thrill, it's an adrenaline rush. I feel like this is the closest I'm going to get to being an adrenaline junkie. I enjoy that, but also I enjoy, as I said, I benefited a lot from the community and people helping me when I started out, and I enjoy being able to give that back, whether that's to people wanting to start out in tech or wanting to change careers, or even just changing people's attitude. So I deal with front end, and so a lot of the development community doesn't like or respect some of the stuff that I do. So it's being able to change their mind and to show them what you can actually do with the languages I use. And so that's also really nice. The difference I've been able to make has been really great. And probably also the people. I really enjoy the people. I actually don't make it to many talks at conferences because I get stuck in the hallway track. So I am really suffering right now because people ask how I'm going. I'm like, well, I'm an extrovert who lives alone, and it's basically illegal for me to go and see people right now.
And that's why I enjoy having you in this call, because we're hoping that we could continue spreading the positivity that you always do when you're in these in-person events. But thank you so much, Amy. I love your story, and I might hand over to Kieran now. Kieran, you have a pretty, like, I would say, linear career in the sense that you started out as a Microsoft student ambassador and, like, basically worked your way through the ladder, so to speak. And now you are the head of IT at Telstra Purple. Do you want to tell us about your journey and how you've managed to carve this career path for you?
Yeah, so I suppose my journey started in university. I had an interest in IT operations, Microsoft technologies, and security sort of topics. My sort of first real sort of experience with a lot of the conferences was when I was at uni. I started to sort of try to go to any free conference that was put on by basically any sort of software vendor or community out there. And that's when I started to get involved and interact with a lot of the members of the Microsoft MVP program, even back then. And that's then how I sort of got pulled into the Microsoft Student Ambassador program. That sort of program, it's sort of gone away now. It's still sort of around in some parts. The idea with that was to, I should say, share, stories about Microsoft technologies with, university students and the lecturers to help prepare students for when they went into their corporate professional lives. After uni, I sort of went into IT operations. Did the standard sort of junior sort of system administrator roles. I was the only Windows sort of administrator in a team of 20 odd people that were managing Unix mainframes, Open VMS and VAX systems, and sort of every other possible operating system and hardware platform under the sun. And that was kind of an interesting period because they were going through a lot of growth, and we needed to manage a lot of things with not many people. And that's sort of a recurring theme with a lot of the roles that I've taken up, a lot of places I've worked at is massive growth, but trying to manage that growth with a small number of people. And then throughout the years, I've gone through and become a senior system administrator and so on. I've spent some time doing solution architecture, and whilst that was something I enjoyed, I found it wasn't quite suited for me. And then joined Redify in a hands-on sort of role to basically automate everything that was possible. Help automate and manage their internal systems, but also then start helping with the customer stories as well. Redify about 2.5, 3 years ago was acquired by Telstra. We're now going through another journey again, becoming Telstra Purple and joining with a whole bunch of different parts of Telstra and other sort of acquisitions to sort of form this single cohesive group. And that's once again, it's a period of a lot of change, and there's a lot of growth going on, and we need to try and do that with a minimal amount of people and and a minimal amount of costs as well. So that's sort of that journey there. But certainly community events and conferences have been a big part of my career and my life for the last 10, 15 odd years. And it was Microsoft MVPs who first started to show me around the conference floors, and then it was Microsoft MVPs who were like, "Hey, you're actually pretty smart. You should do a talk." And it was like, I don't know whether I should. And they just nominated me for a conference up in Brisbane, at the Brisbane IT Big Day Out or something it was called. And that's where I sort of started that process and started to do more and more conferences. And then of course, that's when I got nominated and became a Microsoft MVP as well. And it's not just the meeting people, it's not just the technical skills that you learn at these conferences. It's also the people's stories and learning about people's journeys. There's been a lot of people that have been very open about the challenges that they've faced in life and in their careers, and from diversity to mental health, and those stories have also helped me deal with challenges around, anxiety and depression and, burnout and ADHD as well. So for me now, presenting at conferences is all about sort of giving back that investment that the community has made in me.
That's really beautiful, Kieran. And I am curious, and we've talked about this yesterday, and I know that you don't mind me asking you this. You are openly gay, and a lot of people in the community, or in the broader society, do not feel comfortable enough to come out because they feel that this is something that can encumber their progress in their career. Has this been your experience, or did you have a different approach to it? Or more to the point, what's your advice for those who are probably thinking that at the moment?
So, yeah, I mean, my journey is that I only came out, about 10 years ago. I was already in the industry for a while before that. I've been very lucky that, I don't think my sexual orientation has restricted, my career options. There have probably been times where, I've coming out as a continuous process. It's always something that, you're thinking about in the back of your mind. In every interaction, even at conferences or at work, you're sort of, if you're meeting somebody new, you're sort of trying to decide whether how much of your life you're going to share with them. Being openly gay in IT and on social media, I mean, it does break down some of those barriers. I am sure, though, that it has put me into some boxes, but it really hasn't limited me in any way. I'm, very lucky that I now work at a company that, embraces, diversity in our culture, and that's been really good as well. Everybody's journey is going to be different, especially around coming out. And you need to do what feels, safe to you. But there is quite a lot of us that are quite open in the industry, and if you need to reach out and get advice from us, we're all on Twitter, we're all on social media. Reach out and talk to people.
Thank you, Kieran. And they can definitely do that if they want to connect with you on LinkedIn or on Twitter, if they want to get some advice or, they seek your support in anything in that nature, I guess, or otherwise, however they want to connect with you. Thank you. I might head over to Sarah, who is in NZ as we speak, and it's very late at night where she is. But Sarah, you are a trained accountant, and you are basically managing one of the core businesses at Microsoft NZ. Tell us about. I'd love to hear about how you've navigated this space, and obviously you are just at the precipice of starting a new role, so we'd love to learn about how you've done all of this.
Yeah, and great interesting stories. There's some kind of similarities across all of us from a panel perspective, but I think, for me, I came out of uni, and putting your big girl pants on, it's really kind of crazy to think about what career options you want to go for. And I was working in the UK, obviously you can tell from my accent, I'm a Brit, and jobs in London weren't that thick and far between. So I literally, before email, that's how old I am, like literally threw all these letters and my CV at people, and I got a bite from the Arab International Bank in Moorgate, and they interviewed me, and I really didn't know what the role was, but I was like, okay, I'll go for it. And it was an accounting role. And interesting, in the interview, the CFO asked me what my dad did for a job, which I was quite surprised at, because I think they wanted to see if I culturally fitted in. But anyway, long short story, I got the job. That literally meant sitting in an office with a bunch of really old people that did the same boring job day in, day out. And I met a whole bunch of young Kiwis and Aussies, and that was probably the impetus to kind of move me over to this side of the world, and traveled around Oz, and then for some reason ended up here in New Zealand. And I got a job with PwC as an accountant, and did that for about a year, hated it. Then I moved to Fuji Xerox as an accountant, and hated that. And then I kind of realized it wasn't the companies, it was actually accountancy. And so I carried on working full time doing the accountancy work, but got their permission to go to uni. So Nat, interesting to hear your story, because I went back to uni and did my master's in international business with Japanese. So ohayou gozaimasu. And I really learned a lot more about myself and what my passions were. And I did my thesis on sales and marketing, and how the interactions between sales and marketing work, and who's more dominant, or how do the forces work together, and where's the challenges between them. And literally the director of marketing said to me at the time at Fuji Xerox, he said, "Hey Sarah, you know more about our business than we do. We've got a role opening up because one of the ladies is heading off to Singapore. Do you want it?" And I was like, sweet, gets me out of finance. And it was planning and pricing, which was a little bit bean countery as well, but more industry focused strategy pricing. So that was quite exciting. And then I ended up kind of morphing from marketing into sales, strategic sales management, running our bids and tenders team, and then really wanted a bigger job in the leadership team and didn't get that. And then put my hat in the ring for Microsoft. And I was just having a joke with these amazing people on our panel who are far more technical than me. And I didn't even know what virtualization was, didn't know what a server really was, kind of a box, but didn't really understand SQL and Windows. And so, yeah, threw my hat in the ring at Microsoft and got an account management job and just loved it. Knew nothing for years, but just worked really hard to kind of absorb this new technology. And yeah, and I've been at Microsoft 10 years now, well, 10 years in November, and it's been the absolute highlights. If I think about the career I came from and where I am now, I often think, like, if I hadn't been on that accountancy path, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, because I've always got my head in numbers and forecasts and trying to understand market share. And so at the time I thought it was a wasted journey, but now it's been an invaluable journey. So that was an interesting kind of movement for me. But yeah, the highlights has been absolutely Microsoft. And I was actually tallying up, I've had 6 roles in 10 years with Microsoft. So it just shows you where the opportunities are if you keep believing and learning and growing. So yeah, that's me.
I love how, I'm sure you will agree here when I say that sometimes no is actually a direction or a nudge towards the right path for you. And I guess that's shaped by your experience in accounting, that it's like, nah, I'm really not enjoying this. I should stop it. What would you say, would there have been like one of the best pieces of advice that somebody has given to you in the last, say, 10, 15, 20 odd years you've been in your career?
Yeah, I think it's having that self-belief, and I think sometimes in our lives we don't see what we're capable of or who we could become. And I remember being my younger self and kind of having a niggle. I always often say the left-hand side of my body has a negative, "Oh, you can't do it. Are you sure you want to do that? You're not good enough," kind of pulling me back. So that kind of imposter syndrome. And then the right hand side of my body is like, "You can do anything. You're a superhuman. You're Wonder Woman." And so it's good to have a balance. But I think my younger self kept listening to that niggle more. And so for me, it's really been having those people that you could trust, and having those people that you can bounce ideas off and learn from their experiences, but they also see something in you that you can't. And so that advice to me is really believing in yourself and going with your gut, but also listening to your heart and really trying to fulfill your life purpose versus trying to tick the boxes to game the system to be something that you wholeheartedly you don't really want to be. So it's really kind of listening to your authentic self, but believing in yourself. And I've had many folks along the way that have shaped and guided me. And the other thing I think about is, I'm the first woman in my family that has managed to have a career and have a family and to have the freedoms that we have. And I often think of my auntie who married a Catholic guy, had 5 kids, baby making machine, and she would have loved to have what I have now, but she never got that opportunity because she lived in a different era to what we do today, where there was no childcare, where it was deemed not appropriate for women to go to work. And so I often think, actually, I'm very privileged and I'm very lucky now. And actually, I need to make the most of this opportunity, not only for me, but also for my ancestors. So that's something that pushes me forward as well.
I think that's like I think as everything you say, I agree with Sarah, and I want to then maybe give our audience or participants in the call the opportunity to ask questions if they have any at this stage. I'm looking at the chat window, but there isn't any question, but we might have some
any questions in the chat yet, but if anyone does want to ask a question, you've got a few options. You can use the chat window. If you see the raise a hand feature, you could use the raise a hand feature, or feel free to just unmute and ask a question. And while you think about what your questions might be, and I know Shiva's got more questions lined up as well, because we have a stack, just to let you know that we do have a competition running and a shed load of prizes to give away from our sponsors, some of which are sitting behind Lorian's desk and some of which are in the post, because we are in the times when the post takes ages now. So if you have access to scan the QR code, please take the opportunity now, and if you're a registered participant, you'll go into the draw for some really cool stuff. So I'm not seeing anyone unmuting or popping things in the chat, which selfishly is awesome, because that means Shiva can ask more of the questions that we have lined up, and we can just take advantage of that. So quickly, just a reminder of our sponsors, who are the ones providing all the awesome prizes. And I will reshare or stop sharing my screen so you can see everyone's lovely faces again.
I just want to ask again if there is anybody who wants to ask a question, because if not, I do have one last question for our panel, but I want to give the participants a chance to ask. Here we go. Open question. Whilst
Do you want me to read that one out, or are you good?
I'm
You
good.
got it.
Whilst I've worked fully remote before from 2011 to 2013, what do you see as the main challenges for people moving forward who are over 40?
That's funny, because we were kind of talking about that yesterday, weren't we?
Yes. So I guess to rephrase, like, for a lot of people have been working remotely on and off in the last, say, 5 years, I guess, or 7 years in this case. But remote work is increasingly becoming a norm now. Do we anticipate any challenges for people who are over 40 years of age, I'm assuming? Does anyone want to take that question?
I'm probably the only person who's old enough. Go for it, Nat.
So I think the issue is less about remote working, but for workers over 40, unfortunately, it's the last form of discrimination that we're all facing right now, ageism. So particularly in technology and marketing, certain sectors are more impacted by ageism. So I guess the way to counter that is really accepting that in all likelihood, we are going to live longer lives. So therefore, we need to plan our careers very differently. So there's a concept of in the 100-year life, there are multiple stages. And we call it a multi-stage living. And so instead of the traditional way of studying, working, and then retiring, the model for sustaining our well-being and also our livelihoods and leading a meaningful lifestyle throughout all those stages is actually to rest, reskill, think about where the world's going, to ensure that you've always got the skills that will set you up for the future, to future-proofing your career. So it's really important, no matter what stage you are in your life and which industry, because it's inevitably going to change and evolve with technology. So it's really important that we all continue to reskill, take stock, look after our health so that we can live and work in a really sustainable manner. And also for women as well, it's really important to be able to keep generating an income and also lead a meaningful type of work, so that we don't deal with high levels of stress and the health issues that can come with stress. So I think this pandemic has made a lot of people really think about what are those important factors to leading a meaningful lifestyle and career. And the fact that a lot of people have had to take stock of their life and also having more time to themselves, and realize a lot of the stress can sometimes be self-generated. And then, so how do you replenish your energy? And for some, it's by spending time with lots of people. So Amy, you talked about like how you're still trying to do that in a virtual work way, because you know yourself. And so you're just finding the alternative in the best possible way to ensure that you stay really connected with the things that you really enjoy doing. So I think it's a good time now to really reflect on what are we good at and how we can contribute to the world, and also how the world's changing, so that if we do need to reskill, that we can stay relevant and do the things that we can contribute in a way that we can generate an income from, or just volunteering. Volunteering, there's a lot of health benefits, and does a lot of good when we can figure out how we can contribute our skills and knowledge and our time to other parts of the community or society.
Sarah, do you want to take a stab at that question too?
Yeah. As you know, it's my birthday this week. Just putting that in there. As was yours, Shiva. So it's the best birthday, May. Gemini's crazy personalities. What was I going to say? Yeah, I think I saw a great quote somewhere which says, "Work isn't a place you go; it's a thing that you do." And I think this COVID situation has really kind of tipped the thing, or you're working from home or you're really working, on its head. And I think what I found personally is I don't stop. You're just in conference calls and meetings all day, and if anything, I'm way more productive now, and I'm way more settled because I'm not fighting the traffic, I'm not screaming at my kids to get out the door, I'm not hungry and eating everything in the pantry. When I come home, I'm just eating the pantry the whole time. And for me, it's less stressful when I'm working at home, and I feel more in control. And I think what it's made us realize is that actually technology is an enabler, and we actually really don't need to be in the office the whole time. But I think we are people that are social creatures, and we do like that human interaction. So it's how do we create this hybrid motion whereby fully remote work isn't going to be the full norm, but will probably be more normal than what we've ever seen in our history. So I'm really excited about it. And I think having 3 children, seeing them actually learn from home has been pretty amazing. It's, if you think about traditional classrooms and how kids interact and how they learn from each other, they're still pinging each other on chats and chat rooms and phones and laughing and TikTok. And so I kind of feel like there's a new social norm now that exists. So I think for someone who is over 40, I've really enjoyed it, and I've seen other peers and friends my age group are really embracing it. So yeah, I think this is a pivot in our history that will be the norm very soon.
I couldn't agree more. And I hope we were able to answer your question, Anonymous. But, well, I will now ask their next question to Amy and Kieran. The question is, are there any tips for growing the skills and confidence for being an online presenter as you move to heavy use of social media, virtual job applications, needing to undertake online interview questions, etc.? So you both are obviously well, I don't want to make an ageist comparison here, but we have a bit like, we're a bit more social media savvy. I guess that's a safe, safe statement to make, because that is the generation that we come from. I say we, not. But yeah, like, just to also give you the chance to answer this question, do you have any tips or advice on how to optimize technology in order to improve your chances of being considered for a role? I guess is the question here. Kieran,
Right.
yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, Shiva, don't worry, I won't be offended. I saw that question come through and I went, I am not going anywhere near that question. I thought I'd get in trouble for answering that one. I think one of the things is, which I've definitely found, so this is sort of my first experience as well with doing remote presentations, remote workshops, and doing all of this. And I actually had a remote job interview today. So I've now done all of them. Is practice. Practice really helps. My first remote presentation, it wasn't until after I finished talking, I noticed I'd been tensing every single muscle in my body the whole time, because you don't get that feedback from an audience. You can't see whether or not they're enjoying it. You don't get feedback. They're not laughing and reacting to your talk, which is a really hard thing to get used to, but that's gotten easier as it goes on. So trying to see if there's any meetups where you can do a remote presentation. If your co-workers want to do a remote lunch and learn, even if you just want to do remote things to your friends. I actually started doing Twitch streaming, because I don't get any feedback, but because it's a bit more casual and it's a longer time, that has really helped to get more comfortable to talking to a computer, but without getting any feedback for it. So that kind of practice and just sort of getting used to it is doing a lot of good. I even found during my job interview this morning, I was so relaxed, and I think just because it felt normal. It felt like what I've been doing this whole 2 months was just chatting to someone virtually. So because I'd gotten used to it, I was able to be more relaxed, and it felt less formal that way, I think.
That's excellent practical advice, Amy. Kieran, as somebody who's probably going through all these job applications and making a decision on who you're hiring, what would you advise somebody who's on the other end of the table, wanting to get the job in a virtual environment like we have now?
I think a lot of this sort of similar rules that we give to candidates about a face-to-face interview still rings true when it's virtual. If you are in an interview, you need to dress appropriately, even if it's just for the for this part of the screen, so to speak. But make sure that you're still sort of wearing the appropriate attire. Think about what's behind you. I've had a few meetings and interviews over the last few weeks where what's in the background is probably, it's fine, but others might not think it's fine. So really think about that. And certainly make sure, and it's the same sort of piece of advice, whether it's an interview or a meeting or something like this, is make sure you've got a great microphone so that people can hear you. I can live with a low res webcam, but the audio quality needs to be there so that I can hear your responses and talk to you and communicate with you effectively.
I guess the message here is first impressions matter in person or online, and any way that you can enhance that first impression, whether it's cosmetic by tidying up your room and not holding your coal in your bedroom, for example. And say if you want to invest in good headsets, Craig Arnold has just suggested Logitech. We are plugging Logitech. Are they one of your sponsors, Rebecca? But yes,
actually, Logitech are one of our sponsors. So
there you go. Thank you very much,
Appreciate
Logitech,
that.
for sponsoring.
And thank you, Amy, for dropping in the link to Sonia's blog post about So Now You're a Remote Presenter. I've been fortunate to see her present about that twice now, and it's amazing advice. And I'm piping up now to do the wrap-up signal. Unfortunately, we could probably take a couple more minutes for one more question, maybe.
Sure. Do we have any further questions from our participants? Because if not, I'll take a stab at it. But I will ask our panelists to keep it short and sweet because we are running over time. If you were to give an advice to your younger self, one sentence, what would that be? I'll start with you, Sarah.
I think I touched on it earlier a little bit. It would be, it would be believe in yourself. That would be it. Short and snappy. There you go. Done. Tick.
Excellent. Kieran.
I think it would be very similar. Believe in yourself. Make sure that you surround yourself with people that will, encourage and drive you. If you are in a work environment where you don't feel challenged, that's probably the sign that you need to start looking for that next challenge. So that's the sort of big piece of advice I'd give.
Excellent. Nat, I might tag you as our third to the last responder to that question.
I think it's really important to surround yourself by people who really boost you up. So who really highlight what your strengths are and what your potential is. So even when it's not obvious to you where you can go, that there's people who are constantly shining the light on where your possibilities are.
And Amy?
Probably not to study engineering. Probably not to study engineering. But a more something not just for me would be that it's okay to fail. And in fact, it's actually a great thing to fail, because my failures have been where I've managed to learn the most.
I couldn't have picked a better way to end our panel discussion, I think. On that note, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sarah, Kieran, Amy, and Nat, for joining us this evening. I had a good time. I hope you did too. I hope our listeners have enjoyed our eavesdropping in our conversation, and I hope the people who will be listening to the recording will do too. And thank you to the organizers of M365 May, Rebecca Jackson, Lauren Strand, Megan Strand, and Daryl Webster, as well as Mark Honey. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing his name correctly, but they've done a phenomenal job of running pretty much 3 to 5 virtual events every single day for the whole month of May for the community, all for the love of helping everybody go through all, upskilling, learning how to use technology, and supporting each other in this difficult time. I've got nothing more. I could keep talking, but I won't.
I know you could keep talking, and I feel bad interrupting you, but I think that's my job as the mod, is to say thank you, Shiva, for accepting my request, invitation, demand to be the lovely host of the panel. And thank you, Kieran, Sarah, Amy, and Nat. Nice to meet some new people and also hear some people I know talk about their amazing careers. And thank you to everyone on the call.